the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Employment and Social Development.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise today to speak in support of Bill C-31, an act to implement the Budget 2014, Economic Action Plan 2014. Before I begin, of course, I want to first pay tribute to the late Jim Flaherty, the Honourable Jim Flaherty, who first tabled the budget back in March. He was referred to as the best finance minister in the world. We all hold him close to our hearts, and I think that the passing of the first Budget Implementation Act is due in great part to the effort he put in to develop this budget, which was tabled, as I said earlier, this spring. Now, thank you. Now, one of the things that happened when Jim Flaherty first became finance minister was that we were soon into the largest global recession since the Great Depression of the 30s. And thanks to the leadership of Jim Flaherty as finance minister and the prime minister, Canada has been able to respond from this greatest recession stronger and faster than any other country in the G7. And one of the reasons we were able to do it was because between 2006 and 2008, we actually took $40 billion off the federal debt, giving us the flexibility we needed when the recession did hit to engage in stimulus spending, to keep our tradespeople working, to keep the economic engines that make Canada flow churning. Because of the decisions that were made early on in this mandate by this finance minister and by the prime minister in support of Canada, we were able to go into that recession in strong enough a fiscal position that we could take strong action at the beginning of that recession to limit its damage upon the Canadian economy. And as we emerged from the greatest recession since the Great Depression, we made a commitment during the 2011 election to return the federal government to a balanced budget. Now, this is a daunting task, and many people across Canada said this would be impossible in such a short time. Or if we took strong steps to do that, we'd be destabilizing the economy and hurting the future of Canada if we try to do it by 2015. Now, as I see it, there's three ways for a government to balance the budget. The first is a path that we did not choose, and that path is what I call the easy path to balance a budget, would be to simply raise taxes. And we've seen other governments attempt to balance budgets by raising taxes across Canada. Not only have we not raised taxes upon Canadian taxpayers, Canadian families, Canadian businesses, we actually made the decision and the commitment to lower taxes. And today in Canada, the average family of four is paying over $3,200 less federal tax than they did when we took over office in 2006. I think that's a testament to the courage and the determination by this Prime Minister and Finance Minister Flaherty, and now the Finance Minister we currently have. We also lowered corporate taxes, which encourage investment into Canada, which keep our economic energies running. It keeps our small businesses, our medium-sized enterprises, with the ability to pay low taxes so they may be able to hire that one or two more people to help us encourage employment in this country. So low corporate taxes and low personal taxes, low taxes upon the families, is the direction we chose to go, instead of raising taxes like we see some of the opposition parties push for on a continual basis. Now, the second direction we could have taken to balance the budget would be to slash transfers to the provinces. Now, these are the needed funds that provinces use to provide the services that Canadians hold so close to their hearts: health care, education, community services. Provinces across Canada need those valuable transfer dollars so they can deliver on these services that Canadians not only need, but they expect. These transfer payments are very, very important for the provinces to do their job as partners with the federal government of Canada. In fact, today in Canada, we've not only not lowered those transfer payments like we saw the former Liberal government do in the 90s when they tried to balance the budget after earlier recession, where they cut billions and billions of dollars from those federal transfers to the provinces, particularly in the area of health care. And I believe the billions of dollars that previous government cut in health care saw nurse layoffs, hospital closures across this country, doctors fleeing to the United States for better deals because the provinces could not afford, with these federal cuts, to provide adequate health care in a competitive nature in North America. We believe that was the wrong way to go. And I believe personally that the cuts that were made during those 90s to stabilize the health care system to the extent that we still have not fully recovered from those cuts that were made early on in their mandate. Instead of cutting transfers to the province in an attempt to balance the budget, we've actually made a commitment to the provinces and increased those transfers. And in fact, we've increased the transfers envelope to the provinces from $42 billion in 2005 to $65 billion in 2014, a $23 billion increase in those valuable transfers to the provinces. The health transfer alone has gone from $20 billion in 2005 to $32 billion in 2014, and will reach $40 billion for health care alone by the end of this decade. A true commitment by this Prime Minister, by Finance Minister Flaherty, and our latest Finance Minister to health care across the country. In my own home province of Nova Scotia in 2005, the total transfer envelope for the province of Nova Scotia was $2.2 billion. This year, for the first time, the federal government transferred the province of Nova Scotia the tune of $3 billion. Almost a third of the total revenue of the province of Nova Scotia comes directly from these transfers from the federal government. Can you imagine how difficult it would be for the provinces to meet their commitments to the people of this country if those transfers were slashed by this government in some sort of random attempt, a willy-nilly attempt to balance the budget on the backs of those transfers to the provinces? We chose not to do that. We chose a different path. The path we did choose, the path under the leadership of Finance Minister Flaherty and the Prime Minister, was to look inside government spending itself first, make precision and needed cuts and needed reductions to government departments across the board, making sure that we took the time to make sure that the frontline services for Canadians were protected, but we made good reductions so that Canadian taxpayers could have lower taxes, the provinces get their transfers protected, and we could balance the budget. That was the decision we made under the leadership of the Finance Minister and the Prime Minister. And with the implementation of this budget, we now are facing a balanced budget moving forward, and Canada is best positioned of any country in the G7 to seize the next 20 years as a decade of growth for this country, where we will achieve a leadership position unannounced, unknown to us long before that recession took place. We're going to emerge stronger and better than we ever expected Canada to be at this point. Now, I know I only have a couple of minutes left, but I do want to talk about one more issue that's contained in this Act, having to do with a challenge we do face as we move forward, as we engage in this positive future for this country. And that is the paradox of having too many Canadians still unemployed in this country despite our recovery from the recession, and many, many jobs across Canada where the employers can't find skilled people to fill them. And that's why in this Budget Implementation Act, we're implementing the Youth Apprenticeship Loan. This is a $100 million program, so young people across Canada who are engaging in the trades for the first time will be able to count on the federal government to help support them to the tune of $4,000 interest-free loan for each year of their training, so they can engage in a trade which will lead to a job, so they can get married, raise their own family, and be confident that they can provide a substantive family life. They can provide for them as they raise their children. This is a commitment we have made in this budget. We think it's the proper route to take. So as Canada now emerges from the largest recession since the Great Depression in a strong fiscal position, we now have the confidence that we can engage in a robust recovery where we create jobs, and we're going to have the skilled Canadians to fill those jobs. This is the challenge we face. We're up to the job, and we look forward to the opposition's support for this bill. I encourage them to support it. Help us make Canada the strong, proud nation we know it can be. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank my friend for his speech. This is the credit I'll give him, is he's one of the few Conservatives over there that, while he has some notes, will speak extemporaneously from time to time. It's not I think it's great. I think it's a tradition in this House that we've sometimes lost, that certainly from the government benches we see page after page of Prime Minister's office prepared notes, and they read them off faithfully, and that's very nice. But with respect to this budget bill, because it's what we're dealing with here, well, I'm tempted to get into the larger economic issues that he talked about. What we've got in front of us here tonight is a bill of over 360 pages that affects more than 60 laws currently on the books. And one of the aspects buried within this bill is a tax treaty with the United States, our largest trading partner, most significant tax treaty we could see. I wonder if he has any misgivings at all about the implications for those perhaps up to 1 million Canadians who will be impacted and have their personal tax information sent on to the IRS without their even knowing. We've asked for a moment, Mr. Speaker, we asked for a notification in the bill to simply say that to those who have their information passed to the IRS, that the bank should notify them. I'm wondering if he would be in support of at least that amendment to this very bad deal to at least allow Canadians the knowledge that their information is being passed on to the IRS.
Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the honourable member across for his question. In fact, what he refers to is a conversation I actually did have with the former finance minister, as I had several constituents in my riding come to my office and inquire about the situation with FACA and how that was going to affect them. And I was told by the finance minister at the time, we are in heavy negotiations with the United States of America to make sure that we negotiate a deal where we'll protect the rights, protect the privacy of these Canadians who could be affected by this legislation that took place in the United States of America. And I can tell you that I can remember the finance minister standing in this House announcing the deal that had been made with the United States in order to protect Canadians. We hear the fear-mongering by the opposition side, but we know that the RESPs are protected. We know your RRSPs are protected. We know they were excluded from any deal. We're making a continued strong effort to negotiate with the United States to make sure all Canadians are protected from these measures. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Vancouver Quadra.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I heard my Conservative colleague congratulate his government for having paid down the debt in the early years of government when they, of course, were left with a $13 billion surplus by the previous Liberal government and proceeded to quickly get into deficit, which has lasted 7 years. But I do want to ask, in those funds that were saved, that he was congratulating the government for having money to spend in this budget. How does he feel about the fact that veterans who have had their disability payments, which are payments for pain and suffering, clawed back since 2006 under his government's watch? Some of these clawbacks are being replaced, but only between May 29th, 2012 and September 30th, 2012. That's it. Just several months worth when it has years.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, I want to thank the honourable member across the way for her question. First of all, she talked about the surplus the Liberals apparently left our government with. But if you remember back in those days, around 2004, 2005, before our government took over, there was a huge issue in this country called the fiscal imbalance between the provinces and the federal government. And we had provinces across the country complaining about the federal government for their cuts and transfers, for the way they treated the provinces, causing this fiscal imbalance. Well, you don't hear the provinces complaining about the fiscal imbalance anymore because when this government took over, the finance minister and the prime minister made changes to the equalization formula and fixed that problem. So we don't hear that. So when she talks about the $13 billion surplus, that was done on the backs of the provinces. We did something different. We've done it a different way. On our second issue with veterans, we are investing more than $700 million per year, more in support of our veterans than that party did when they were in office. No party has invested more in support of the health and welfare and future of our veterans than the Conservative Party of Canada. I stand firmly behind the supports we are putting forward to veterans. Thank you.
We have time for just a very short question and response. The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And my honourable colleague for Cumberland, Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley, given that this FATCA buried in Bill C-31 requires that the banks search the customer records for every single customer, search them with a fine-tooth comb, does the government have any estimates for what that's going to cost and how much those costs will be passed on to every bank customer across Canada?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, I can remember the finance minister standing in this House and addressing questions similar to this by the opposition on this deal. This was a tough negotiation that this government conducted with the United States of America to make sure that the privacy and the economic concerns of people that might be affected by this legislation that was put forward in the United States of America, we made sure that we put a negotiation in place to protect them. As far as the actual financial costs, Those will have to be determined later as we move forward in this, because we can't predict what's going to happen in the future. But I can tell you, we will invest whatever money it takes to protect the finances, to protect the privacy of all Canadians that could be affected by this legislation. Thank you.